be in this room with you here tonight and with the Borg Warner Trophy, with so many Indianapolis heroes. But my mission here is to introduce Kim Wolfkill, who will be running this roundtable tonight. Kim is the new editor-in-chief of Road and Track. And to know Kim is really to admire and respect him. He is a fantastic editor, fantastic thinker, great racer, and welcome aboard. So without further ado, Kim Wolfkill.
Eddie, you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Eddie, thank you. You're too kind. And thank you all of you for being here. You know, I mean, it's something of a homecoming for me. As many of you may know, I was at Road and Track 10 years ago. And as you also know, I whined a lot about the things I wish we could have done with the magazine. It was you know, an amazing brand, and we all know how special it is. But at the same time, I had ideas, I had notions. And so fast forward to 10 years later, and the magazine, the brand, everything, it's an amazing place. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. I mean, it's really a special opportunity. And I have Eddie to thank and an amazing staff. My predecessor, Larry Webster, got it to where it is, and I feel very, very fortunate and privileged to move it forward, to really, to help our readers and new readers really understand and explore and feel that automotive passion that all of us do. And so along those lines, speaking of automotive passion, we're here with the Borg Warner Trophy, with Indy drivers and IndyCar, and that really is, I mean, people have been, as long as there were two cars, people were racing them. And so, it's an honor for us to share the company of these drivers. And so, what I want to do is we're gonna have a great discussion with these guys. We've got past champions. We've got the mayor of Hinchtown, and we've got a great crew here. And really, what we want to do is we want to celebrate the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500. I mean, the greatest spectacle in racing. But also, I mean, it's one race in a season that every season IndyCar keeps getting better and better. And we want to talk to these guys. Let's talk about the past. Let's talk about the present. Let's talk about the future. Let's see where IndyCar and motorsports are going through their eyes. So without further ado, I want to introduce some of the drivers we've got up here. As I mentioned, the one driver that many of you know through social media, the mayor of Hinchtown. He's a race winner in IndyCar. He's a fan favorite, but I think perhaps even more importantly is he's coming back to race this season. As we know, he had a tough crash last year. He's been out of action, but we're happy to see him back. So James Hinchcliffe, welcome back, and please come up here.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
great
welcome.
to be here.
Our next driver, the Flying Dutchman, and basically he still holds the 1 and 4 lap records around Indianapolis, a 3-time pole winner, a 2-time winner of the race, and currently now is returned to the IndyCar world to be a race steward. So he's basically be watching guys like this to make sure they're behaving themselves, and also bringing all that experience with them. So Arie and Luyendyk, please join us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Our next driver is, many consider the fastest man to drive ovals, and a record 6 poles at Indianapolis 500, and only one of 3 people to win 4 races plus 2 series championships, and currently he's also an advisor and a driver coach for one of the most powerful teams in IndyCar, Team Penske. So Rick Mears, please join us.
just slow at getting up these days. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, you know, from one of the most famous families in all of racing, and you know, we've all been watching the family for years. I mean, you think about it. His father, Al Sr., won 4 Indy 500s. His uncle Bobby, three, and then Al 2, and not to mention 2 series championships. So again, Al, welcome.
There you are.
So we've got all this talent up here, and both past and present. And I think it'd be great to just talk about just IndyCar open wheel racing in general, where what you guys have experienced, what you're experiencing now. And so I'd open it up to you and just say what you've experienced, what you've seen. How do you see how have you seen the sport evolve and change over the years from when you competed to when you're competing now?
I think the oldest amongst us should talk about that. He's seen more than we all have, and
I think, racing is racing. It always will be. And I think some of the basics never change. As far as you're still trying to get those 4 footprints on the ground. Get as much out of them as you can. Get it balanced the way you want it, to be as fast as anybody else. That basic never really changes that much, I don't think. How we get there is what changes. The way we measure things. To me, the two biggest changes, the biggest change is safety. The cars are as safe as they've ever been in the history of the sport, period. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest gains that we've had. The other is how we get to that balance and get to that setup, how we measure things, the electronics. I remember when we first started, first time we measured anything, I think we measured steering, as far as the graphs go, steering, throttle, and speed. I think it was the 3 channels we had. And I had to go find a laptop. They just started making laptops. I didn't even know how to turn one on. And I bought one and took it to the hotel room. And then after,
big and heavy.
Yeah. And after practice, the guys would load it down on a floppy and put a Post-it note on there. Okay, stick this in the side, push this button, turn this on, and then I'd pull up the graphs and look at the graphs. It was so cool measuring things. But then the next big gain was, obviously we measure everything now, but how do you utilize what you're measuring? And that was a big learning curve on how to utilize electronics. But those 2 things, and like I said, safety I think is one of the biggest changes.
but it was kind of fun to experience the progress,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we started off with, we had a tachometer and we had oil pressure and water temperature, and then as it all evolved and the computers came into play, it was really exciting to be part of that evolution. Of course, James is driving a car with the paddle shifting, which we didn't experience, but we went from a 5-speed gearbox to a 6-speed, and then to the sequential gearbox. And going to a sequential was already a pretty cool thing to do and experience. So, but the safety as far as the racetrack also, if you look at the Indianapolis Speedway, the safer barrier they call it the soft wall, which it's not really that soft when you hit it.
Softer wall is probably a better.
It's a bit softer.
I don't know what one
absorbing
feels
wall.
like.
Yeah.
I've never felt one. So.
Well, my last
It doesn't tickle.
My last big crash at Indy, I missed the soft barrier by so much, and I still hit the concrete. But anyway, so this used to be really a lot of fun to be part of the evolution as we have experienced. James lesser than we have, but he's experiencing the ultimate cool racing machine at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny kind of hearing them talk about it, talking about having attack, water temperature, and oil pressure. Now I can tell you what my brake bias is. I can tell you like all sorts of different, where the anti-roll bar positions are. We used to have shock adjusters in the car with the R03. I mean, the technology has developed in such a way, from 3 channels of data to about 130 channels of data. My data reading experience is much different than Rick described. It's a laptop that I'm already just assumed I know how to turn it on and what I'm doing. Floppy disks, as you know, don't exist anymore. And it's hours and hours and hours of pouring through.
Floppy disk?
Yeah.
It doesn't, really?
That's not a thing anymore. 8-tracks are on the way out too, Al.
Yeah.
You should. But
I'm going to have to catch up
You're
here.
gonna have to. You're gonna have to. But and, as Arie said, I'm very fortunate that I get a race, in this era with, what I think the coolest race cars on the planet and technology at a level it's never been at. But also incredibly fortunate to, as Rick touched on, be racing in the safest era. I learned that firsthand, in a big way last year, and I can sit here and say I've never hit concrete on an oval.
Wow.
These guys have never hit a softball. I've never hit concrete. It's just what the sport's done, where we've gone, not only with car technology, with track technology, with driver equipment. The Hans device, we literally could not sit here between us and count the number of lives that single device has saved, in the last sort of 15, 20 years. And it's just, like I said, it's something I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to do now. And I look back at some of the cars these guys drove and think, these are cowboys.
I'm lucky, though, I didn't get this era because I'd never make it past the steering wheel today. Too many things going on there.
I played a lot of video games growing up. It was more built for us, I think, that generation. It's basically just a PlayStation. It's a glorified PlayStation game, if I'm honest. That's all racing really is.
And then the one thing that we didn't do is what he did is drive sprint cars.
Yeah.
True.
True.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, you talk about the diversity of skills and drivers and courses that you race now, and where you all came from. I mean, Rick, you came out of off-road. Al, you were sprint cars, and Arie, you were European, open wheel, and then you started probably in karts, and we met when you were doing Formula BMW 10, 12 years ago, and I mean it seems to tell us, as far as to win a championship, it takes more than just being fast on one track on one day. I mean, it takes a real, especially these days with you've got permanent road courses, you've got street circuits, you've got medium-sized ovals, you've got super speedways. I mean, what does it take to put a full successful championship season together?
Well,
You need to be able to pretty much do all of that, what you just said. You need to be able to run good on the street circuits, the permanent road courses, the short ovals, which is Milwaukee, and now they've added Phoenix, which is going to be really good, and that's short oval. And then you've got your 1.5 miles, which is the medium oval, and then the super speedways. And so you need to be able to adapt to each circuit of what it wants, and the team work as a whole, because we all know that it's a team effort that really makes it all happen for everyone. And so the engineers taking the data, what they're doing with the car, and making it the best they can. The mechanics making it reliable. You got your engine manufacturers, Chevy and Honda, doing what they can to get the most power out of it and get the best fuel mileage, so that you can put that strategy into the race that you're racing, and then the driver to go out there and use his head and be fast, but know when to be fast and when to be careful with what's around you, your surroundings. And so it takes a whole team effort to do this kind of racing, which is honestly the most unique racing in the world, for that matter.
Well, yeah, we talked earlier about how back years ago you'd get somebody who raced stock cars and sports cars and open wheel, but now those were all separate series. Now you're getting again road courses and street courses and ovals all in one series. And James, how have you adjusted to, especially going from, say, road racing, which is what you were raised with, and Arie, probably you too, to ovals? It's so unique, and then Indy itself is such a unique place.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. It's like you said, I grew up road racing. I didn't really start oval racing until I joined Indy Lights back in 2009. And what floored me right from the get-go was how different the skill set was. And it's already why I appreciated IndyCar as a fan. And now being in it, it makes my appreciation so much greater, because the skill, you can't just be good at one, and to be good at all of them is not, a guy that's good on street courses doesn't just de facto mean he's good on super speedways or short ovals. and learning that different set of skills, that different racecraft, that different ability to set up a car, because it needs something so different on those types of tracks than it does from the other. Other than the fact that it's got the same seat, 4 tires, and a steering wheel, there's almost nothing that translates. And for me, that was a big hurdle to overcome. You kind of look at it and you think on paper, yeah, I go from turning left and right, different radius corners and different brake zones. This will be easy. I just got to go left a couple times, no problem. And I cannot. Yeah, look, they get it, and I now get it. It took me a while, I'll openly admit. And again, it just strengthened my love for this sport and why. I think that the drivers that are champions, in IndyCar racing at this level are the most versatile and most successful drivers, I think, in the world. And you see guys like Scott Dixon jump into a sports car and win everything, because we're trained at this level to be, adept at so many different kinds of motorsport in that sense, so many different skills, like I said. So it's been a big learning curve, but it's certainly been a fun one.
Yeah, I coached some drivers that came over from Europe, and so before we went to Indianapolis, they said, well, I can't be that hard. It's 4 corners and a couple of straightaways. I go, oh, well, just, So we went through the basics, and then they go out, and then they came back in, and they were like, whoa. Because if you think about pure speed, and that's really something that grabs you, an Indy car goes faster around the corner than a Formula One car goes anywhere on any track in the world on a straight line.
Absolutely.
So like Monza would be the quickest straightaway, or maybe Spa, or I'm not sure what other circuits, but those two come to mind. But we used to go quicker into the corner at Indianapolis into turn 1 than they would at the fastest racetrack they've ever seen in a straight line. So
Before they hit the brakes.
And
yeah,
quicker by a lot.
They
Yeah.
would
By a
they would
lot,
show
not
up
just
here
a
and they
little.
would be really taken aback by just the pure speed, and that's them running by themselves. And now they have to run in traffic with the turbulence. So there's so many moving parts and there's so much going on that you have to pay attention to, especially in traffic.
And the big difference to me that always separated your road courses, street circuit, whatever, to your speedways is, well, obviously it's the speed. With speed comes less time to react. And the way I'd always looked at it, the slower the course, the more I can drive off my reflexes. And I can let it step out, catch it, and bring it back. The slower the corner is, like a street circuit, I could overshoot a corner, I could pitch it in, I could get it sideways, I could gather it up and go on, whatever. The faster the corner, the less time you have to react, and the more you have to learn to work off the field that the car gives you before it happens. So you've got to really narrow your field band down and start learning and listening to what the car's telling you at what it's going to do just before it happens, because you've got to already be responding to it by the time it does happen. If you wait like in a slower corner where it steps out and then you go to catch it, it's usually too late. And you can drive it that way, but I just preferred not to. I'd rather know it was coming. But so me, that was a big thing. And that only came with laps. And that's another thing that a lot of people didn't realize. You get somebody new on a speedway, and I'd say, just don't get excited. They get frustrated, whatever. Just relax, run laps. Because it takes a lot of time to reduce that field down, and get it down to where you want it. And there's no substitute for laps on a speedway.
I think the experience, like in your race when you won in '92, your car was loose, but
It was way loose at
you
the
were
end.
kind of catching it because you
Yeah.
were prepared, so
Yeah.
you were kind of ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's, like you
Yeah.
say, experience. And I've had those moments too where you
Yeah,
just
when-
know it's coming, so I'm going to be ready. You're almost opposite luck before it goes sideways.
Pretty
A little
much
bit.
what I would do was when I'd be out there running at any super speedway, is I'd go off of the steering.
Yeah.
If the steering was real heavy and you just, you just think about turning it and it already turned real quick and you haven't really done anything, then it's too loose, it's too positive, and so we'd come in and lighten up that steering a bit to where it's got some understeer to it, and then we'd start working that back out of it again. So,
And the same thing happens once it gets sideways. If it ever steps out on you, I've had it step out like, and you catch it, and you don't want to wind any more into it than you just have to, because
That's right.
the more you wind in, the more you're going to have to unwind. And so you get out there and you feed a little more, and then a little bit more, and you start you feel like right rear footprints start growing, And when you feel that right rear footprint start to grow, you better start unwinding now. Because if you don't, it's going to be pointed the other direction.
It's almost
So
like
it's the same thing.
you
You
turn
gotta
in
be
and
ahead
at
of
the
it,
same
yeah.
time you turn back. Quick little,
Yep.
it still gets us excited, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's
I'm excited just listening to these
I
guys.
know.
That's what caused all the gray.
Oh, yeah, you just use some formula.
So is
Your
that
hair
how,
looked pretty good in some of those pictures.
is that how Elio does it? He's
Just a paint job, yeah.
he's still using some Just for Men there.
Goes into, yeah, just for men, there you
Yeah.
go.
I think that's Elio's
Medium
shirt.
brown.
Yeah.
Well, it also, I mean, you know, every season of IndyCar just seems to get more and more competitive, and it appears it doesn't matter whether it's a road course race or an oval. I mean, it's an all-out sprint from beginning to end. I mean, was that the case for you guys, and do you see that as sort of the new way of racing? It's just sprint, or you know, Rick, as we talked about earlier, it seems like with Indy, you have a real strategy as to when you just stay in the hunt and then when you really attack.
I think a lot has changed where, like, Rick won in 91, I finished third, I was a lap down. You don't see that anymore. You see the top 20
Yeah,
guys in the same lap. So it's a lot more about track position these days, and you could probably talk about that, but if your team messes up in the pit stop just by a few seconds, you could go from being a contender to nobody. And I think in the earlier days, 80s, 90s, we could make up a lot, but these days there's not a lot of making up to do.
Well, everybody's playing with more of the same blocks today.
Yeah.
You know, where back then there were more engine manufacturers, chassis manufacturers, you know, and different combinations of all the above. And plus the equipment wasn't as reliable. So you add all that together, and that's how you'd get the runaways. Today, I really don't feel it would matter what you did to the rules, you wouldn't get the runaway that we used to have, no matter what you did. Because we're all, you know, basically playing with the same chassis, we're stacking the same blocks. It's just a matter of how you stack them. Pretty soon everybody eventually figures out how to stack them the same way, and it closes things back up. So I think it's going to be a lot more equal, and the reliability, no matter what the rules were, you're not going to have the runaways that we used to have. And I know people get a little leery when you start taking downforce off. They're afraid of separating the cars or afraid of having the runaway. I don't think that would happen today, no matter what you did with the rules, because we're all, you know, running the same chassis and everything pretty much. So they're all so much closer than they ever used to be.
And you really don't have to think about your gearbox at all today. It's the paddle shifts,
Yeah.
and
got
it's
it
helping
easy.
you.
Basically, what they're saying is I suck. They're saying I wouldn't be able to hack it back in the day. That's what they're saying. I get it.
Well,
They're
you
being
didn't,
nice,
you
but I
didn't
get
have
it.
to say it outright. We just, you
No,
know,
it's fine. I'm okay. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's fine. I get it.
No, absolutely not. I think
No,
it's
no.
more, I think it's tougher now to win than
oh,
it
it
was.
definitely. The
back then.
competition level is
Exactly.
definitely tougher than it's ever been.
Yeah, I mean that's you know when I drove for Michael Andretti's team, you know I got to spend a lot of time with Michael, a lot of time with Mario, and hearing stories from kind of back in those days was always very fascinating to me. I was a fan, and I watched a lot of the races that we would talk about. But that was one of the big things, like you guys say. I mean, the difference between chassis, engines, tires, you know, there's different tire manufacturers at that point. You had to have the right combination of all three. And let's say two teams had the best combination. So you weren't only racing two teams, obviously, but there were two teams that had the best of everything. And then it kind of trickled down from there. Now we almost have the same of everything. You know, we have the two engine manufacturers and, you know, the corresponding body kits, but the level of competition is so close. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago in the race, definitely wasn't last year. 2 years ago in the race, maybe it was 3, whatever it was. We had cut a tire or something, had to pit kind of out of sequence. We fell back. I think it was 19th or 20th, and I come out of turn 3, and I saw the leader heading. Sorry, I come out of turn 2, and I see the leader heading into turn 3, and I was 19th or 20th. 2/3 of the field was on the same straightaway. You know, and you think back to these races when 3-4 cars finish on the lead lap. I mean, it is just so different. It is so competitive. You know, it's forced guys to be a little bit more liberal with, I think, how they drive and how they try and pass, because the opportunities are so few and far between, which makes your job this year a lot harder. You know,
but
trying to keep us
actually
straight.
when we raced, there was no pit speed limit, and we would come in the pits. I mean,
don't wanna talk
coming
about
out of turn 4, and if you were pitted in at the end of the pit lane, then you could afford to drive in the pit at 200 plus, and then you were happy that you came to a standstill in your pit box.
We always pitted down at the far end by the tower, so I'd focus on the tower because the pit lane was so rough, your vision was blurry. You couldn't make your teammates out. You couldn't make the people out, you know, who was who in the pits.
Yeah.
because you're running so fast down through there and hitting the bumps. So I knew where the tower was. I could see that. So I'd stay focused on the tower until I got, okay, right about now, and you get on the brakes and let everything slow down enough and let your vision come back in. Then you pick out your guys and turn in.
For the
Then you
record.
and then you would hope that nobody
It's
leaves their
true.
pit
It's
box
true.
and goes in front of you, because then you would be totally hosed.
For the record, two things.
That
First,
opening got very narrow at 200 in that entrance, too.
two things. First of all, that's terrifying what you just said. I did not know that.
No,
and that's
but what I
terrifying.
was getting to is that now with the 50 mile, or is it 60, I should know
Again,
that.
easy for these guys.
60 miles an hour, they have to slow down. It's become the most dangerous part of the track, because
It was
everybody comes in
self-policing.
at
That's a relative thing to say.
everybody comes into the pit at the same time. They all want to make up time, because now they all coming in at the same time, and it gets the crews are wearing helmets, and you've actually seen more accidents in pit lane
See,
with
it-
all
it-
these safety measurements than in our day.
It was also self-policing. If I knew I had somebody coming in at 200, I wasn't going to pull out in front of him.
Well, that's a great point. What the other
So
point I was going to make, though,
they might say, go, 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 but I'm watching the mirror.
I'm not going.
I'm
Right.
going until-
if your outside front is telling you to go, 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 when a guy's coming 200 down the
Yes.
pit lane,
Yes.
I would fire your outside front. But the other issue I was going to say is you
We
guys need
didn't
to
have spotters.
understand. You guys need to understand that pit wall at Indy until this year was only like 3 feet high. So you had these cars coming in at 200 miles an hour and a 3-foot wall protecting them from either the racetrack or what was on the other side of pit wall.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
We didn't know any different.
I get it.
I mean, that was
We
the way.
sac-
Ignorance is bliss, right?
We
I mean,
sacrificed
That's
all
why
of that just for you guys.
that's sweet of you. Even though you're sitting here saying we should probably take the speed limit off because it'd be safer.
I got in my 79 winning car one time. They wanted me to run it around someplace. I got in and slid down and sit down. And I looked and wait a minute.
I drove this,
The car stopped right here. There was nothing from
and
here
then you
up.
had fiberglass.
And I thought, what was I thinking? You know, this is not good.
My-
I remember hitting the wall with this thing. And they put the little fiberglass shell over the top of you that went down and covered you up and made you feel like you were enclosed, you know. But at the time, it was the state of the art and the safest car on the track
That's right.
at that time. It was the safest one out there.
My 83 Eagle was just
Yeah,
like that.
same thing.
Yep.
And then our
Just
feet
don't know
were
any better.
very far forward, our legs.
With
Way
just
too much.
aluminum
Proof of that.
honeycomb. Yeah, nothing.
Basically, what they're saying is it's amazing that any of them are sitting here. So congratulations on that.
Well, but having said that, you know, Rick went through a lot of pain and agony with his feet and his feet. You did only one time, right?
Yeah, I had my worst accident, I broke my right ankle twice through my whole career. I was very, very fortunate.
And then I never broke anything, because I'm
Even more
basically,
fortunate.
you know, Dutch wooden shoes. You know, I was driving. I was driving with the wooden shoes with really good protection.
There you go.
But he had one of the worst incidents we've seen in the last couple of years. So although racing is so much more safer, you are never going to get it safe. So it's always going to be dangerous.
For sure.
But we know that, and we still do it because
Are nuts.
it's in our DNA.
Oh yeah, no, what he said.
Well, I mean, Rick and James, I mean, you guys had big crashes. You were laid up. I mean, how did you deal with that recovery and coming back and you know, getting back in the cockpit and having that same fire? What drove you in that, you know, in that period of recovery? And were you different in any way? Did you look at the racing any differently?
Not really. I mean, it's, you know, as soon as I looked down and saw both, they were originally going to take both feet off. And fortunately, you know, Penske and Dr. Olvey were standing there and said, no, we're going to try something else. And he got me out of there and flew me to Indianapolis. And Terry Trammell kind of pieced them back together and saved them. But as soon as I looked down and saw both feet were there, I knew I was going to drive again. I just didn't know when. That was the only question mark. Is because it's what I love doing. You know, if it wasn't what I loved doing, I'd have been looking down and saying, well, I'm done. I'm not, you know, whether they're there or not. But if you really love what you're doing, the risk outweighs the reward, and that's what it's all about. And also, I knew what caused it. As long as I never, what used to scare me to death was when somebody get out of a car after an accident and say, man, I don't know what happened. I've never crashed one that I didn't know what happened. I mean, it's, you know, I either felt something break, I overdid it, I got in too deep, I picked the throttle up too soon, I yanked the wheel, I turned in front of somebody, I did something, or I felt something break. And as long as we could find what it was that broke, I was perfectly fine with getting back in a car. Not knowing would be the scary part. You know, if I had done something and didn't know what I did to cause it, then it would be difficult to get back in the car. But with my feet, the only question mark was how long was it going to take. The question mark was, you know, before I get back to where I was at before. That was the only question in my mind. Because I loved what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was very similar. I mean, I woke up in ICU. I was on a ventilator. I had to talk with a pen and a piece of paper. And my third question was, when can I get back in a car? And the doctors looked at me completely dumbfounded. They're like, this car is what just did this to you, and you want to get back into one. But, you know, like Rick said, the cause was known. And for me, a big part of it was that it wasn't my mistake. You know, we had a mechanical failure that caused the accident. And that happens. I get that. It was nobody's fault. It wasn't that my, you know, something on the suspension wasn't bolted on right. My crew didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. The other drivers didn't do anything wrong. It was just a failure. And that happens in anything. And for me, that made it a lot easier to kind of take. If I had made a mistake and it ended, you know, with the consequences that I, you know, had to deal with, it would have been harder for me to get back to that level, you know, and I would have been worried about making that mistake again, even if you know what it is. You know, you're always going to kind of have that in the back of your head. But for me, it was very easy because I knew I did nothing wrong. So as soon as I was healthy enough and the doctor said I could do it, I was going to do it again. As much as my mother wanted me, you know, to switch into accounting, it just wasn't going to happen. And yeah, I mean, it was, you take a highly motivated individual and put them in that situation, and they'll get back.
And the best therapy was getting back in the car.
Absolutely.
Of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I had this big crash in Fontana, and I woke up in the hospital an hour later, and I really wasn't injured. But in the end, I had a concussion, but that went away pretty soon. We had a race 2 weeks later. So my car owner had already tried to find another driver. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you're not going to drive, are you, after that big shunt? I go, yeah, why not? I mean, the chances of it happening 2 weekends in a row was just not going to happen. So I drove 2 weeks later.
So yeah, I use the concussion excuse too. I'm like, I don't remember it. So as far as I'm concerned, I got nothing to be afraid of, right?
No, I remember every second,
happen.
actually.
Well, with the you know, with the 100th running of the Indy 500 just around the corner, I mean, for you guys that have won the race, I mean,
let me interject. I was going to say it's super cool that we're sitting up here, and you know, between the four of us, there's 8 Indy 500 wins. We got 2, 4, 2, and I'm here. So it's super it's super cool to be part of such an esteemed panel.
well, my next
Well,
question.
but wait a minute. How long did it take you for when you first Indy 500?
10 years.
10 years. Rick?
2.
I'm about to flip him off, but I won't.
How about you? How about you?
I was race number 6. So
Okay, so you average that out. I still have.
So you.
This will be my 6th because I didn't do last year.
Okay, you better win
So this will be my
this
si-
year,
yeah, basically.
otherwise.
Well, no, it took. This
How
came
long
up.
did it take you?
6.
It took Tony 12. I had that conversation with TK the other day. So it took him 12.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we'll see.
Well, hopefully this is a feeling that you will have. But I'd like to. I mean, your first win, or what was your most memorable win, and what is that feeling that you have when you've won the Indianapolis 500?
Well, for me, the biggest one was the 4th one. I mean, and for different reasons. The first one will always have its place, but like I said, it was my second attempt to win it. I didn't appreciate it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I appreciated the heck out of it, but I didn't understand it. I didn't know how hard it was. I didn't know how difficult it was to win that race, and I didn't know what it meant. I hadn't grown up around the Speedway. Indy cars were way out of my league. I never thought about an Indy car until 6 months before I actually got in one, and never making a living at it. So I hadn't been a real study or a student of Indianapolis. So winning at that area, I was great. We won another race. We'll try to do it again next year, you know. And then you go a couple more years, you don't win it, and you look around, you're getting a little older, a little wiser, and I'm learning more of the history of the Speedway and what all it means to the world, basically. And I'm thinking, there's a lot of guys that have never had the opportunity to even get here, let alone run the race, let alone win it. So the odds of winning it more than once are pretty slim. And so then we won the second one, so that made that one better. And then I think the same process happened again for the third. And, and then by then, The fourth one, you're getting later in your career. You don't know how much longer you're going to be running. And basically, I ran every race to gear up to be ready for the shootout at the end, to do the battle at the end of the race, to win the race. And of the 4 wins, the only time that shootout materialized was the 4th one. So when you've got, knowing more about the place, getting older, in the end of your career, and then also after the 3rd win saying, you know what, only 2 guys have ever won 4, so what are the odds of that happening? They're getting pretty great against you. And so then that, and then having the shootout with Michael at the end, and finally getting to have the battle at the end of the race and come out on top really made the 4th one special.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
And then,
I've been practicing.
and then the 4th time you were really happy because you said to yourself, how can I win this thing at my age? And
I was
you,
pretty
Al,
sure that one was going to be the
but
last
he knew
one.
everything about the Speedway. He
Excuse
knew
me.
more about it than all of us here
When's the
together.
first time you were there, Al? How old were you?
Gosh, I was probably 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old when I first went there. And it was in the summertime because my sisters, I had 2 older sisters and myself growing up, and there in the early 70s, late 60s, we weren't allowed to go to the race because that's where Dad was working. So, the kids weren't allowed to come to the race. And so our first race that we had ever went to was 1973, and that was a really bad year for the race itself because they had accident at the start of the race, a big crash going into turn 1, and then it started raining, and so they didn't have the race until the following week or something like that, and then there was the year Sweet Savage lost his life during the race that time, and then it was even rain shortened, and so it was a really bad year for accidents and so on for the 500. But and then we didn't go back. Actually, I started racing go-karts about that time after that, and so my dad would ask me if I wanted to come back to the race or race go-karts, and I said, well, I want to race. I don't want to watch you race. I want to race. And so that's what we did. And the first year back that I came back to the 500 was 1982, because I knew I was going to be running in 83, and I wanted to come. And so, but the history of the place, I remember as a kid when dreaming about it and going to bed at night, my dad's Johnny Lightning poster hanging in my bedroom, and looking at that and counting the years of when I was going to be 21 years old, which you couldn't be legally to run Indy unless you were 21. Back then it's 18, I believe now, but at 21, and so that was 1983. My birthday is in April, so I would just turn 21 and I'd race that May, and that dream came true for me, and then I remember as a kid counting up. Well, my dad wanted his 5th year or something like that, and my Uncle Bobby wanted his 5th year or something like that, and so, okay, 5 years will be 88 or something like that, and then 6 years and 7 years, and if I hadn't won it by 7 years, well then I'm not going to win, kind of thing, but we kept trying, and 89, just like Rick said, it was all about gearing up for the end of the race, and actually I felt one of my best drives ever of the 500 miles was in 1989. We didn't lead any laps or anything like that. We just hung out with the leaders, stayed out of trouble. I had an extremely fast car that year, and I was going pretty much off of what my dad taught me to do, which is the most important lap you want to lead is the last one. That's the one that pays the money. That's the one that does everything.
Only one you need.
Unless it's easy to lead, then, which I find that ironic nowadays because my dad is actually the all-time lap leader at the Indianapolis 500. So I really didn't think about that. I was doing my own thing, and he's right. Leading the last lap is the one. And in '89, I came up and was racing Emerson Fittipaldi, who had led it that whole day. And we came up and we passed him, and we definitely had the faster car. Traffic came up and kind of got me caught in going into turn 3 as we're coming around for the white flag, the last one, and we touched. I ended up in the wall, and Emerson went on to win his first 500, and so.
Then you gave him the salute, right?
I gave him a salute. Yeah, I clapped and gave him thumbs up, because when he did come by me at that time, I had gotten out of the car. The track is under yellow now, so he's on his last lap. So everybody slowed down and that kind of thing. And I got out of the car and I start walking out to the track, and one of the safety crewmen was standing in front of me, and he got in front of me and he goes, "Al, where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going out there." He goes, "What, you want to flip him off?" I went, "Yeah." Like, of course. And he stepped aside, "Go right ahead." Okay.
Not these days.
So I walked out there, and there was just people everywhere. The Indianapolis 500, people, the grandstands, and I was waiting for Emerson to come around, and he's behind the pace car, of course, and I guess there was just a moment of clarity. I don't know exactly what, but I just thought about, he's coming around to win the Indy 500. He's coming around to get the checkered, and he's led it all day long. I came up and tried to steal it from him, and it didn't work, and so I congratulated him on his first 500, because I know Emerson too, and Emerson is a wonderful man. The last thing he would want to do is hurt anyone, and so especially racing. And so, we were in the Indy 500, and we were going for the win, and both of us were going for the win, not just one. And so, unfortunately, I ended up not, and he did. And so, but it was all about gearing for that final run, and I guess that's what it was all about. And so, fast forward to '92. We were in the Galmer, and we had it as trimmed out as we could possibly get it, and it was all about the end of the race. And so, Scott Goodyear, who started 33rd in that race, he had a super fast car that day, and really all during that day, it was Michael Andretti who dominated the race. I mean, at one point, he had the entire field down one lap. And so, with 15 or 18 to go, something like that, his car broke. And Scott Goodyear and I had been passing each other like that for like the last 50 or 60 laps. But it was for seconds, so no one even knew that race was going on. And so, we finally we were fortunate to win and be a part of it. So, it was great. It was great. I went home, and at Thanksgiving, I could finally hold my head up. That was the most important thing, especially with Uncle Bobby.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Nothing keeps him happy.
Well, we're about to finish up, but Arie, just love to hear your thoughts on what it's like to win the race, and also just your outlook for the coming season, the coming race, and sort of future seasons for the series.
Well, the first time I won the race, when I got out of the car, I was like in disbelief, and so much happens after the race. It's all kind of becomes a bit foggy, and then you look back, and you start putting it all together. You look at the video and you go, "Oh yeah, that was cool," and because you have so many people just clamoring over you right after the race. And I didn't really know what to say in winner's circle. I see these guys these days, they get out and they have a whole story and they know who to thank. And I'm like, man, I'm just happy to be here. It's like I didn't know what to say. And then, of course, you win it that first time. And for me, I was like, I got to do this again. This is a lot of fun. But then 7 years later, I won it again, you know, with a lot of ups and downs in between. And that second time was almost like a relief. Like finally, I won it for the second time. I'm calm. I can kind of rest in my mind. But for the future, I mean, I'm a total open wheel guy. I just love Indianapolis. I love being around guys like James and the current crop of drivers. We have a lot of great drivers. They're competitive. They're passionate. They run marathons. They do triathlons. I don't know. These guys are so fit. It makes me think back to the day when Al used to smoke right before he got in the car. But Al was like super fit. He would drive the street courses like no other, and never drop a wheel, and always. So, but that's a whole different story. We could be here all night talking about each other. But the current drivers, I really love being around them. I'm a race steward now. I'm there for the best of the sport, for the best of the drivers, basically looking out for all of them, that they, you know, it's great to see them all come out at the end of the race and nobody's hurt, and that's what we strive for, and have good races. And the quality of the product is just fantastic. The last couple of Indy 500s have been so exciting to watch. And with the 100th race, it's hard to imagine that this race will be held for the 100th time. And there's always drama at Indy. For some reason, there's just always drama. Right. And I'm sure it's not going to be anything different this year.
Yeah, well, we're all looking forward to it. James, looking forward to having you back in the car. And again, all of you, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you.
I feel the same way, you know. I think that we're all, people have been asking me lately about the 100th running, and my only answer is that, you know, it's the greatest race in the world, and for us to be alive and to be present at this time of the 100th running, to see from 1911, Ray Haroon's car, and to see all the decades of what the 500 has done, and how it's developed the automobile back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and where it is today, it's just a true blessing. And to me, I feel a true blessing that I'm going to be at the 500 on its 100th running, and I'm going to be witnessing the fastest automobiles in the world go out there and compete with the best drivers and the best teams and everybody that's involved in it. They're 100 years in the making, and I think that's just a true blessing to be able to witness the whole thing, and I feel truly lucky to be a part of it.
I know I'm going to celebrate it because odds are probably pretty good I won't be around for the next one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to enjoy this one.
Yeah, but you know,
I plan on being around for the next one.
I certainly hope I am.
but the thing is too that I don't know about you guys, but I still get, when they start up the engines to go race, I get goosebumps every year. I never got goosebumps when I was racing. I was kind of thinking about other things. But as a spectator, you experience it different now. You have a whole different outlook or look at this race than when you were driving. That back then, you just you got in your car and put the belts on and everything is hooked up and it goes quiet. There's 500,000 people, but it goes quiet because you're in your own little cocoon. But now, as a spectator, as somebody who really experienced the deal, it's just, every year it's just amazing how it just grabs you.
And I mean, everything Al said about, you know, getting to be there to watch it, 100th running, you know, times it by 5 for me because I get to be there and participate in it. You know, I got into the sport right in 2011 was my first Indy 500, which was the 100th anniversary of the first running. And now we're celebrating the 100th running, and to have been able to, you know, kind of bookend that and be there for all that as a driver is just, it's just incredible. Like you said, 100 years. You know, it was Super Bowl 50 this year. That's cute.
Right.
It's adorable. Them trying so hard to catch up. Throwing their little balls. It's just so running around. It's adorable. But no, I mean, it's sitting right there, guys. This is the reason we do it. This beautiful trophy back there. Yeah, just can't wait to do it again.
Well, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Can we ask questions? Just a quickie? Okay, so you guys talked a lot about the oval versus other kinds of tracks, and I'm curious because no one said, what's the trick? What's the deal? What do you do? What's the thing you have to do in an oval? I don't know. I've never raced. So naive question.
I think Rick kind of nailed it a little bit there. Is, you know, in a road course or street course, your movements are all very big. Your inputs are all very big. It's big stabs on the throttle, big hits on the brake, big turning of the wheel. As the speed increases, think about driving on the highway, right, versus driving on a road where you're doing 10 miles an hour. You know, you take a corner at 10 miles an hour, you got to turn the wheel like this, right? On the highway, if you do this, it's going to end very poorly for you. It's very similar, but, you know, again, times that by 5. We're doing, you know, 230 miles an hour. So your inputs have to be so subtle, so precise. And likewise, the feedback that the car gives you is that much more sort of tuned down. And you've got to tune up your senses to feel these little things. You know, in a street course, you're getting beaten around that race car. It's like having a boxing match inside a telephone booth. It's really like that aggressive inside the car. But on these speedways at that speed, everything is so delicate, so precise. And the hardest thing was learning to kind of detune your body, or I guess tune up your body to take all these senses in and slow all your movements down and be that, you know, that much more precise.
But also, that's what I liked about it. You got to spend so long of a time in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't just stand on the brake, turn, and stand on the gas and go. I mean, you got to spend a lot of time in the corner to really break it down and analyze it. You know, to get on that limit, get right up next to that edge, and you got time to sneak up on it and play with it. And it wasn't as much of a stat. And that always suited my natural driving style more so. I had to learn how to drive. I had to get more animated. I had to learn how to get more animated on the slower tracks. The faster one always seemed to kind of fit me naturally better, but you got to spend so much time in the corner to break it down.
Some of the European tracks have really fast corners like Monza and Silverstone, and they were like fourth. We had, in our little open wheel cars, we had 4 gears, and some of them were 4th gear corners, and I really enjoyed that like drift at high speed. And so when I came to America and got on an oval, initially I was pretty scared because the speed was like, wow, these guys are nuts here. Whoever came up with this idea to drive around a track with concrete waiting for you at the exit, because we were used to grass runoffs, but anyway, but the high speed that was involved in oval racing was something that just suited my style. I was a good race car driver, but Indy was something that just suited me. And it was fortunate for me because, you know, winning Indy is better than winning Mid-Ohio, for instance.
Apologies to anybody from Lexington, Ohio in the room. It's not a shot at your fair town or your beautiful track.
But within the IndyCar series, Indianapolis 500 is the Super Bowl, so winning any other race is like winning a club event. And that's the difference between, so for me it was fortunate that I had a good feeling for that place. But, and once you get the car to work really well, because that's the thing that Rick keeps saying, which is true, it's not just the driver, it's the team, the engineer, it all has to just blend in together. And you have to make those pieces work for you with your crew. And once you hit the sweet spot, it's like you can almost do anything, and that's when you have a good car.
Yeah, that was another one of the differences between the slower and the faster track. Is the slower the track, the more you could carry the car. And that's when I always used to, you know, when I was working with the younger kids in the light stuff, the faster the track you get to speedway, you've got to learn to make the car carry you, not you carry the car. Now, you'll carry it a little bit for qualifying, that kind of thing, but you aren't going to carry it all day like you do on a shorter track. And get away with it, it will bite you. And so it's really focusing on the setup and learning what the car wants and listening to what the cars talk to you, you know, and they tell you exactly what they want you to do if you listen to them. And it's learning to listen to the car and listen to, you know, the changes that it needs and it wants to make that car carry you so you don't have to carry it. That's
The thing
a
about
big difference
ovals
on the
is
Speedway.
the oval type racing is just, you're going to crash. If you start racing on ovals, you can bet that, I don't think there's any IndyCar driver who hasn't crashed on an oval, because it's, the fine line between staying on the road and hitting the wall is really very narrow. So there's drivers that have hit the wall, and there are drivers that are going to hit the wall. There's basically no
Bobby
in
Rahal
between.
taught me that one.
So it's going to happen, and trying to keep it in check as much as possible is kind of desirable.
Besides that, it hurts.
Yeah.
Well,
That
thanks
was always
again,
a good
guys.
incentive. Didn't like pain.
Well, we've got to wrap up, but again, very much, thank you for being here. Great stories.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Did Bobby say that too? Bobby Rahal? He said that to you?
Yeah, yeah. When I first started racing ovals, he was like, look, there's two